The men on board HMS Terror have every expectation of triumph. As part of the 1845 Franklin expedition, the first steam-powered vessels ever to search for the legendary Northwest Passage, they are as scientifically supported an enterprise as has ever set forth. As they enter a second summer in the Arctic Circle without a thaw, though, they are stranded in a nightmarish landscape of encroaching ice and darkness. Endlessly cold with diminishing rations, 126 men fight to survive with poisonous food, a dwindling supply of coal, and ships buckling in the grip of crushing ice. But the real enemy is far more terrifying. There is something out there in the frigid darkness, an unseen predator stalking their ship, a monstrous terror constantly clawing to get in. Hi, folks. My name is Lee. I'm the retired book guy. I don't know what the temperature is where you're at, but the heat index here is 100 degrees today. It's been like that all week, so I thought it was a good time for some Arctic horror. Today, we're going to be looking at the 2007 historical horror novel, The Terror by Dan Simmons. Historical horror is a subgenre of horror. It's one of my favorite subgenres, and Dan Simmons was a master at it. This book is based on the 1845 Franklin expedition, which was a British Navy expedition to find the Northwest Passage through northern Canada and the Arctic Circle to the Far East. Okay, first, I'm going to give you some historical context. For 300 years prior to this expedition, European countries have been searching for the Northwest Passage as a way to get to the Far East a lot quicker. Going around the Cape of Good Hope, the southern tip of Africa, or around Cape Horn, around the southern tip of South America, just took too long. It would be much more profitable if they could find a route through the Arctic to the Far East. Franklin's expedition was the 19th attempt by the British Navy to find this route. In 1845, two ships, the HMS Erebus and the HMS Terror, departed England with 134 men on board. These ships had every scientific, technological advantage at the time. They had reinforced steel built into the hull to assist with ice breaking and also to prevent the hull from being crushed if it should have become encased in ice. They were equipped with a locomotive steam engine to power propellers. Even though they were sailing ships, this would help plow them through the water through packed ice. And they had canned food, which was a recently new innovation. So instead of having to take all fresh food, animals that would need to be slaughtered, and fresh fruits and vegetables to prevent scurvy or to help prevent scurvy, which is a disease caused by a lack of vitamin C. It was a frequent problem on seagoing vessels in the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries. So having canned goods, fresh vegetables, and fruits available would help to combat that in theory. The two ships were equipped with 30,000 pounds of food in sealed cans. The ships even had many modern conveniences, such as musical instruments and a 1,000 book library on board. And there were three pets. There was a pet monkey, there was a pet dog, and a cat to hunt for rats. The two ships were commanded by veteran captains Sir John Franklin and Francis Crozier, both veterans of polar exploration. After the ships had been gone for one winter, no one was concerned. Everybody thought they definitely have enough provisions. Even if they became stuck in the ice, they should be fine. After two winters, Lady Jane Franklin went to the British Admiralty and requested a search party be sent out, but they still weren't overly concerned. They thought that they would have enough to get through. So finally, in 1848, confidence began to waver, and the British Admiralty decided to send out a search expedition to find the men. Nothing was ever heard from them during this 3 year period. It was a mystery as to what was going on, where they were. This rocked Victorian society to its core. No expedition of this size has ever been lost. Had they been crushed by ice and sunk? Was there a crippling disease on board that decimated them? Were they attacked by Inuit peoples living in the area? Nobody knew. All told, about 32 separate expeditions were sent out to search for them between the years 1848 and 1859. Lots of clues were found over the years, but no definitive story of what actually happened to them ever emerged. There were a few skeletons that were discovered. Some scientific analysis told a story of scurvy and lead poisoning, most likely from the cans, from shoddy soldering that was done on the lids of the canned goods. Finally, in 2014, the HMS Erebus was found in about 11 meters of water. And in 2016, the HMS Terror was found also. They were discovered about 45 miles apart. They were not intact. They had been crushed by ice and sunk. The debris fields were quite large. There were some pieces found intact, but the debris fields were large. You can even look up videos on YouTube of the discovery and of the exploration of the wrecks. But no definitive answers, even after the wrecks were discovered, no definitive answers as to what actually happened to them. And when Dan Simmons wrote the book in 2007, the wrecks hadn't even been discovered at that time. So it was still a mystery. So the genius of Dan Simmons, he took this mystery, what happened to these men, what was known about them, that they were missing, they probably suffered from lead poisoning, from scurvy, the ships were probably crushed in ice, they may have set out on foot. He took what was known and what was conjecture from the clues that were left and that were discovered by the search parties that had been sent out, and he added an element of supernatural and of horror to his book. No spoilers here. I'm not going to say what that supernatural horror element is. He basically fills in the gaps in a supernatural way of what could have happened to them on this expedition and why they disappeared. If you love history, if you love the supernatural, if you love horror, or even if you don't like history, you can definitely appreciate this novel. There's a constant sense of dread that Dan Simmons is able to put into the writing. You're actually on board those ships with those men. You experience what they experience. I know after I read this novel, it really gave me an interest in learning more about it, this expedition in particular, and about polar exploration in general. I bought several books on it. I read about it. In the book, The Terror, there are several maps that he made, so it's easy to follow along with the action. Very well written. Dan Simmons passed away earlier this year. He was a prolific writer, one of my favorite writers. He wrote historical horror, he wrote science fiction, he wrote mystery fiction. Most of his books had supernatural or horror elements to them. If you haven't read Dan Simmons, I highly recommend him. He's definitely one of my favorite authors. If you want something to read on these hot days, I recommend The Terror by Dan Simmons. You won't be disappointed. And I will see you next time.